All right, so I was just where I left off with the Shiite Safavid Persian Empire, um, and I just kind of want to just also mention this. It's kind of interesting in that I met my cousin's wedding this summer. There was a Persian Jewish gentleman who was working on his PhD in history of Iran uh, and Persia, and I was he's going to UCLA for that, and so I was discussing with him a comparing and contrasting of the Safavids, or just Islamic Iran in general, and then the Ottoman Empire, and I said to him, I know, when I do these lectures, I have a lot of information on the Ottoman system, with the Kanun law and Islamic law, and then the Dhimmi courts with the Jews and Christians having their own courts and so on and so forth. And I said, I don't really have a lot of information that I've read to really explain in that kind of detail the systems of rule in Safavid Persia. For example, the exact state of Jews and Christians, and the same kind of material that I have for the Ottoman Empire. And I've read books on this before, but just doesn't have any. I don't have anything to pin down. And he said, "Well, the Ottoman Empire were definitely great at leaving documents, and he seemed to be kind of reaching as well. And so the impression I had is that um, it wasn't as easy to pin down the legacy of these things as the Ottoman Empire. Because I was asking him, do you have a specific book that really nails this for me, gets this down so I can incorporate this? And um, there's this guy working on his PhD at UCLA on this topic, and he's like, "Well, I'll look around, I'll get back to you." I thought, well, um, that kind of gives me a hint that it's a little less information. I'm sure it's not as vague as that. I just kind of wanted to point out that I think, in terms of for historians, Ottoman Empire is easier to explain than the systems that were taking place under the Safavid. Okay, and that's my knowledge where I'm at right now until I get another revelation says otherwise. In any case, here is the Safavid Empire. Now here's the Ottoman Empire, so you can see this contrast. And over here's India, and right here Kabul. You recognize that? Oh yeah, Afghanistan, right? Okay, so at this time period, Afghanistan is incorporated into the Safavid Empire, um, and here's Turkestan up here. Okay, I'm pointing out these things too because this also helps you maybe to visualize things that as we go into the modern times, you can kind of see where the traces of some of the ethnic or religious tensions may merge from, or some of the things that are synthesized together. Okay, so all right, just thought I would show you that. All right, so here we have by the 16th century these lines cross. So not everybody, because they have the same ideology, is gonna get along. And this is why, by the way, the idea of clash of civilizations, I just don't buy into that. um, Christians killed had warred Christians warred with themselves, as we see if you take Western Civ, that different Christian kingdoms fought for power and influence over each other. Catholics and Protestants then had their own bloody conflict and then used that as an excuse. And to this day, Ireland still deals with the Catholic-Protestant divide, just for one example. And you have the Ottoman Safavid Shiite Sunni divide, and the Shiite Sunni divide is, as I've mentioned, is currently really at an all-time low right now in current times. Okay, so anyhow, just bringing that all out. Now, from there, we're going to move to India. And I'm going through things really briefly here with not a lot of detail, but it'll kind of help at least catch you to speed again on some of these other aspects. The Delhi Sultanate pushed back Mongol invasions in the 13th century, but then in 1405, Timur's son took over and established the Timurid dynasty of India. India has always had, problems with invaders. And remember, I've talked about it's always been, it's not always necessarily been unified through rule. Okay, so here we shift into the Mughal Empire, and this is what's significant. So the last Timurid, named Babur, 5th generation descendant of Tamerlane and 13th century generation, and 13th generation descendant of Genghis Khan. Isn't it amazing, by the way, Genghis Khan, his legacy in terms of where he pops up? Same thing I mentioned before with Alexander the Great and people like Napoleon. But anyhow, in 1526 founds the Mughal or Gurkhani Empire. Al-Mughal in Arabic is a word for Mongol. Okay, so and sometimes it's spelled Mogul, by the way. All right. Okay, so let's talk about Akbar. He's an interesting character. So he's the grandson of Babur. He reconciled relations between Muslims and Hindus. He abolished the tax imposed on non-Muslims. Remember, we've talked about that. And so, this is interesting. By the way, officially, you have heard that in Islam, when there were conquests, that Jews and Christians were allowed to remain in their religion, but under a politically subservient state and pay a tax. That polytheists were to be killed or to convert to Islam. That God, there would not be a toleration of idolatry and worshiping many gods, polytheism. But then you have the Mughal dynasty that rules over a majority of Hindus that have idols everywhere, and despite many of them claiming that they're monotheists, they are worshiping many, many gods. And one could argue that if the Muslims were going to rule a country that entrenched in what appears to be polytheistic idolatry, they would have to fight extra hard. This would be more pragmatic to just let it go. In any case, the Mughals did. And so again, I just return to the fact that religion, there's always the official narrative, and then there's actually what happens, okay? And in the case of Akbar, he seemed to be very interested. I mean, I don't want to make it like he was a hippie. He was a heavy-handed ruler. He tripled the size of the empire. You don't do that by being like a softie, okay? But kind of like in maybe the traditions of the Mongols that we've talked about, he was very relaxed towards religion, So here he does, in terms of for the Hindus, he was he allowed them to have high positions. Again, he took off that tax that would be put on non-Muslims under Islamic rule, and he was very tolerant. But he actually went to the other extreme, and I say extreme in terms of for where a Muslim would feel, is that he actually went and created his own religion. Okay. One in which he worshipped the sun 4 times a day. He did his own thing, and that obviously didn't set right for a lot of Muslims. He's considered a heretic at that point. Now, what's also interesting, though, is he made Persian, or Farsi, the language of government and Islamic law of the land. So for the Mughals, Persian is the court language. You remember I talked about earlier, if you do, that the Islamic world would end up being dominated by Turks spreading Persian culture, and that's in fact what we're seeing again here. Okay. By the way, the Ottomans courts used Persian as well. So yes, that is definitely true, and you see there's a very Persian feel to the art here. Okay. But his legacy didn't last and things shifted. I'm going to end here, and I'll return back to the Taj Mahal story and the continued legacy of the Mughals.